Okay, hello there. We're back in Diablo 3, and we're going to be talking about damage for a second. Now, the first thing you need to know about damage in Diablo is that this number right here lies to you. It's it's not worthless, but it also isn't really telling you anything too helpful. What this number right here represents is the damage you would do if you walked up and just hit attack. I haven't had attack on my bars since level 2. It also has a direct correlation, in my case, as a barbarian, to any of these three skills. So if you have Bash and Onslaught, the actual damage that you output is going to be 194% of this number here, assuming you can just walk up, click on them, and just bash. Now, this is based on, as you can see here, your weapon itself, the damage per second it does, which is related to the damage per attack, and obviously the attacks per second. Your crit chance, the critical hit damage bonus, which is applied to the crit chance, your strength modifier, and of course your attack speed modifiers, which is what I'm going to be focusing on right now. Here are some rings. They've got 117 strength each. They put my DPS on 24,115 on my character sheet. If I switch those with these 15% attack speed increase ones, despite the fact that I'm losing 234 strength, my DPS is going to go up by, let's see, what's that, 2.5k? 2.5k or so. This is where the game starts lying to you. Let's go see if we can find someone to kill. Okay, here I'm using the increased attack speed rings, and as long as I'm using Bash, they're doing exactly what they say on the tin. They're giving me 30% more Bash damage compared to what I'd be getting if I wasn't wearing them. However, I'm not just using Bash, I'm also using the Seismic Slam. And because I'm not spamming that every time it's up, I'm using it in a more situational manner, it's not benefiting at all by having that extra 15% increased attack speed, except for the fact that I am getting faster rage regeneration when I need it. So, if it's not benefiting from the increased attack speed to any great degree, what does that actually mean for my damage per second? Well, we'll see how much it hits for. Okay, well those were some big crits. Let's see if we can get a better idea of the damage it's actually outputting. So here we go. Seismic Slam comes in. We've got 32, 33, 30, there's a 35, 30, 36. So it would seem that it's hitting for, on average, 30 to 35k of damage per slam, per mob. Okay, so if we switch onto the other rings, and our damage per second has gone down by that 2.5k or whatever, let's see what effect that's actually had on the damage output by Seismic Slam. So, using the same mobs for comparison, and we can see that the lowest we hit for was 37, and the others were 43, 43, there's a 38 or so. So our smallest hit is larger than the biggest hit we had before when we were using the attack speed increase rings. And now we're going to do another test, this time with a sword and board, and using Revenge to shed some light on things like weapon damage. Now, at the moment, I have the strength... At the moment, I have the strength rings on. I've got an 844.8 damage per second, relatively slow one-hander, and this one, which is a 785.9 DPS, that's really fast and also comes with 200 strength. So we've got 4 setups I'm going to try. Firstly, this one, which is doing 15.862 DPS, using the strength rings and the spear. The next is a 17k DPS option using the strength ring, the attack speed rings and the spear. The next is going to be the sword and the strength rings, which is telling us 17.455k DPS. And then finally, or actually probably to start with, a 19.5k DPS setup using the attack speed rings and the sword, the fast sword. And what we're going to look at using Bash as our main skill, we're mostly focusing here on Revenge. We're going to see what Revenge does damage wise with those 4 different setups. So starting with the highest DPS on my character screen option, let's go see what happens. Okay, let's see how we go. We've got 26k, 25k, 22k. No revenge procs, there we go. 22, 19, 21. 16, there's a 24. So now then, on to the second highest DPS option, which was the strength rings and the sword. And once again, let's see what happens. Okay, and similar mobs once again, and we're still getting 19s, 24s. About 25k for those two. There was a 17k in there, that's 16.6. 25, 21, 22. And moving on once again, we're going to be trying the spear and the attack speed rings. This was the third lowest DPS, and we'll see what happens. Slightly different mobs, but the numbers are basically comparable. We're getting 15k's through to about 20, I think 25k's. Maybe some a bit lower, but basically the same again. And finally, the lowest DPS option, which was the strength rings and the spear. And the results are telling. Look at this. Bang. We've got 28k's, 27k's, that's 54 something, or other crit. Once again, bang. Lowest was 19, we've got 27s again, 28s. And then on these guys, which seem to be a bit tougher, the exact same fire zombies as before, and we're back to getting the same sort of, if I ever get around to actually swinging. Come on, Revenge proc, what a lovely skill. Come on now. There we go. 20, 19, a 50 crit. So to compare, those were the numbers with the 19k DPS. The highest one we had, that was with the attack speed and the sword that was quite fast. Those are the numbers we're getting. We're getting 16s, we're getting 20s. And then this was the lowest DPS on our screen at 15k. There was a 4k DPS difference. And Revenge is hitting for basically the exact same amount. So, what does that actually mean as far as we're concerned? That's actually kind of hard to figure out. There are a few things that are definite. A slower weapon is definitely better than a faster weapon when it comes to DPS. That does get a little bit muddied because a faster weapon is better at resource generation. It multiplies your life on hit because you're hitting faster. Faster weapons do have their benefits, but they will do significantly less damage than a slower weapon. If you're on 6k DPS and you're attacking 2 times a second, and someone else is on 6k DPS and they're attacking once a second, they will do so much more damage than you. This is a bit of a problem when it comes to things like the forums. Now, when you're posting your, I've got my resist of this, and my armor's this, and my health is this, and my DPS is this, that DPS number is just about useless. It's generally considered that you need about 6k DPS if you're doing a sword and board through Inferno Act 1. But how you got that 6k DPS will make a significant difference. If you're wearing 45% increased attack speed and you're on 6k DPS, you do not have the damage you need to get through. Because your extra attacks, your revenges, or your charge even, or whatever the heck else you're using, and this will apply to any other class as well, aren't hitting for anywhere near as much. That also means if you're looking at two comparable weapons on the auction house or whatever, and one has got 1000 DPS for a one-hander, it's a nice number, but it got there by having X amount of increased attack speed, that will do less damage than one that got there by having X amount increased damage. When you see a weapon that has increased attack speed as one of its affixes, that increased attack speed has already been taken into account in the weapon's displayed DPS. It's not an additional one. If you've got a 1000 DPS weapon and it's got 40% increased attack speed, it's 1000 DPS because of that 40% increased attack speed. So if you're comparing that to one that's got 1000 DPS because it's got 40% increased damage, that increased damage weapon will do far more damage when you're actually playing because of the weapon's damage range. That's the number you actually need to be looking at. The average between the minimum and the maximum damage is the number that's important if you're comparing two comparable DPS weapons. Things like strength and crit rate and stuff like that get added on top of that, and that's a whole different can of worms. But rule of thumb, pick the one with the biggest damage number. So the average between its damage range, the bigger that is, that's the one you want. When it comes to all the other stats, things get really complicated because what they're worth is dependent on your skill build, the attacks that you're using, and also the other stats that you've got. For example, the more strength you have, the more the weapon damage is worth. The more weapon damage you have, the more strength is worth. So if you're trying to figure out whether or not a weapon with lower DPS but with a bunch of strength on it is worthwhile, it depends on how much other strength is on your gear. 100 strength on a weapon is worth more if you've got 200 strength in total before you put that weapon on than it is if you've got 1000 strength already. The same basic theory applies to things like crit and crit damage. The higher your crit chance, the more crit damage is worth. The higher your crit damage, the more crit chance is worth, etc, etc, etc. It's really quite complicated. The only thing that is definite is that the number you see on your character screen, your character's DPS, is damn near worthless. It doesn't mean much at all when it comes to your effectiveness in actually killing things. If you are actually trying to find advice or anything along those lines, trying to follow people's builds, trying to follow people's gear, anything like that, if you're trying to do that, you need to know more than just the DPS. You need to know the weapon damage and how that relates to the DPS. So that'll be it for this video. I have absolutely no idea if it helps anyone at all, but if it does, maybe let me know and I'll do similar things in the future. There goes a 5-stack Magna kill that I recorded for the hell of it, just for the background. Still using that same two-handed no revenge build. It's quite a lot of fun. You saw me kill some elite mobs earlier as well. That's the playstyle that I'm using. Quite enjoying it. I recommend giving it a shot if you're a bit bored of the usual tank. And I'll see you next time I make a Diablo video.